Promotional consideration brought to you by...
Hi there, I'm Brian Finlay. I've been working in the animation industry for over 20 years. Come join me as we explore the process of creating an animated cartoon. We'll meet some amazing people along the way, right here on Drawn to It, Behind the Screens. Hi there, welcome back to Drawn to It Behind the Screens. Today's episode is all about cleanup. We've got our rough animation out of the way. Now we have to make those scribbles look all nice and pretty for the paint department. See, nowadays, it isn't uncommon for cleanup artists to actually do the painting as they go. Digital tools are sort of blurring the lines between where one job begins and another one ends. Thick and thin lines are a favorite visually. A lot of animators prefer them. Cleanup artists, however, have to work twice as hard when utilizing this style. Now, a thick and thin line is just that. It starts off very thin, goes to very thick, and finishes very thin. You have probably seen it on most animated features. Aladdin is an extreme example. Everything in Aladdin has thick and thin lines. So what do I mean exactly by the cleanup artist has to work twice as hard for thick and thin? Well, if you're gonna do cleanup and you draw your one line over top of the rough animation, that's wonderful. You move on to the next one. But if you're doing thick and thin lines, sometimes you have to redraw the same line 3 or 4 times. And then you have to build up the thickness at its most extreme point, usually at the bottom or where the weight of the anatomy is going to be. And in the industry, this builds up what we call line mileage. Now, today we're lucky enough that we work mostly digitally. And so one artist can oftentimes accomplish a few different jobs in the animation pipeline. But back in the day, they didn't have that luxury. They had nothing but their hand-eye coordination, and with surgical precision, they were able to lay down beautiful, flawless drawings. I mean, they were legends. Digital cleanup, more or less, is a lot faster than traditional cleanup pencil on paper. No way around it, it's still going to be a very tedious process, and it involves a high level of drawing ability. Cleanup artists, most people think of them as tracers, and that is just the furthest from the truth. They are not tracers. They are redrawing what the rough animators provide, putting them on model, but they're doing it with such accuracy and speed. Quite frankly, it makes me jealous. I often think about illustrators who have the luxury of laboring away on one single image, and through their process, which mirrors the animation process of doing a thumbnail, a rough, tracing over it with ink, preparing it for color, very similar. However, animators, and we do it to ourselves, it's part of the nature of the job, we have to draw the same drawing pretty much so many times to get a finished scene. I've often wondered if illustrators think we're crazy. In fact, let's go to Moncton, New Brunswick and pay a visit to professional illustrator and caricature artist Andre Boulard.
As an illustrator, I like to do one image because it's like more details, more time involved into it. As it comes to like animation, you have to redraw all the stuff, so it's a lot of pressure to actually deal with that. So that's why I don't feel like it's a thing for me. So for me, Illustrator, one static image is for details, focus on that, and then basically animation is to express the character in ways that you can't in illustration.
I agree 100%. And I'm often envious of the ability of an illustrator to have the one-off and then be done with it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to check in with legendary 2D animation cleanup artist Emily Jiuliano in Los Angeles. and she's worked on many of your favorite Disney animated films, and she has also worked on many Don Bluth animated films. So take it away, Emily.
Hi, nice to be here today and share a little bit about my phase of a traditionally animated film. My background is very serendipitous. I was going to college to be a graphic designer, and so I came to LA from San Francisco to go to Art Center. And after 6 months, I decided that I wanted to get a job, and I called Hanna-Barbera, Filmation, and Disney. And this was in 1976, and I got a call back from Disney, and 2 weeks later, I had a job there. I think the cleanup artist is a mystery to most people because it's thought that we trace the rough drawings that the animators do. And it's so much more than that. We have model sheets that we work with so that we're always drawing the same proportions, the same character. Every animator draws the characters a little bit differently. I've noticed if it's a tall, skinny guy or a short, stout woman, that's how they draw their character. And so I worked on Little Mermaid, and there was 10 different mermaids. So in our department, we go over all the drawings, we put them on model. Draftsmanship is super important because we're not tracing. We're analyzing the rough drawing. I'm using a scene of Mickey Mouse from Sorcerer's Apprentice here just for educational purposes. When Mickey's arm goes in the sleeve, we have to know where his arm is. We can't just draw a sleeve and have a pokey popsicle stick sticking out the sleeve. So we have to know the anatomy under the costume, the proportions. A good cleanup artist has to understand all of the principles that an animator does, because in our keys, when we're rolling a set of key drawings, we're watching for squash and stretch. We're watching for arcs. An arc means here Mickey's finger is pointing up in the air, and the tip of his finger is creating a huge arc. As he's landing, his nose is creating an arc shape. So all of our movements, basically because of the forces of gravity and inertia and centrifugal force, everything is arcing all the time. So just having shapes move linearly would take a lot of the action out. So a good cleanup artist will notice the arcs, notice the extreme poses, and we accentuate them. So if there's a straight on Mickey's finger here, I exaggerate it. If there's a squash on his foot, I squash it just a little bit more. So everything has a little bit more snap and a little more punch. Another thing that makes a good cleanup artist is working closely with the animator. What is the animator's vision on the scene? If I'm doing key poses, I want to show the animator if I'm going in the right direction. On a few films, we were able to work in a style where we were using a thick and thin line. And so those especially we would take to the animators to see if we had the thick and thin in a way that if they hadn't drawn it in there. So we had to put it in. So we are actually taking their drawings to the next level and want to get us kind of sign off from them. The animators in the 20s, 30s, 40s, they could draw very rough and not close lines off because it was going to go to an inker. And that was the first generation of cleanup artists. They would do a clean line over a rough drawing, and that's sort of what the cleanup department grew out of, was the ink department. There's the hybrid of traditional animation on paper with pencils and the digital world. I've done traditional cleanup on a Cintiq tablet. I was working on a Tinkerbell direct-to-DVD, The Lost Treasure, and I could see every drawing that I had done was the CG character, and it was kind of fun to see. So that's a way that cleanup artists can move into the digital world, but not a lot of studios have digital cleanup or storyboard revision, because Now they just try and encourage the animator to draw clean. So everything kind of gets condensed down to its most simple or most streamlined version. My fortune was to be able to get my training at Disney and have relationships with an animator as their assistant. It really was the way that traditional animation developed at Disney. That's why cleanup is called assistant animation, because the animator does rough drawings and the assistant can put in details, put in shoes, clothing, add hair shapes that the animator approves of. It's like the assistant learns the animator's shorthand. The animator can crank out more footage and trust that it's going to come back to his desk or her desk as if it was all done by one person. And that's where I had the opportunity to be an animator, but I really, really dug doing the follow-up. I like being able to imitate or learn another person's style and be able to make the show seamless from scene to scene, drawing to drawing, scene to scene. On Land Before Time, I was working with John Pomeroy, and he was drawing in blue, and I was actually putting a cleanup line on his blue drawings because we were working well enough together that this would expedite the scenes, and he wouldn't have to do his roughs and then his cleanups. So he would draw in blue, and I would put a line over it.
And even though we're working digitally, it's only slightly faster, as I mentioned before. The biggest time saver comes when we go into the paint phase. With just a click of a mouse, we can fill in a whole wide area of a character and very quickly get through coloring in the entire figure. Back in the old days, they would take one of these known as a celluloid sheet. Inkers would, with a paintbrush, ink on top of the cleanup artist's drawing. Now think about that. The rough animators draw it. The cleanup artists redraw what the rough animators drew. The inkers then redraw what the cleanup artist drew on celluloid like this. Then they would flip it around and they would paint the back of it. Animation is crazy. And once the celluloids were all painted and they were ready for the camera technician would take them and shoot them. And then, do you know what would happen? They would get thrown out or washed off and reused. Now think about that. Every cell, celluloid, animation cell, every cell probably took 2 to 4 hours to make, if not more. And when the camera technician is done with them, off they go. The reason why? They don't store well. The paint chips off. The celluloids would break down over time. And so when you really think about it, animation really is an art form designed to work against itself. So now that we have all of our artwork for our animated short, A Good Day to Draw, finished, our backgrounds are painted, our animation is cleaned up and painted, everything is good to go, we're ready to take all of those art assets into the compositing stage. But we'll do that on another episode of Drawn to It Behind the Screens.